Good morning. This tutorial is going to be on overview of Active Directory management tools. We're going to go through pretty much kind of a high level of the various tools that you can use to manage your Active Directory environment. These tools are based on tools that have user interfaces. I'll do a separate video that kind of goes into some of the tools that you can use that are command line based. Um, rep admin, DS tools, NetDOM, some of those types of tools. But this is going to just cover just our user interface tools. So I've got here, this is my domain controller. So the first tool that most domain administrators use on a day-to-day basis is the Active Directory and Users Computers Snap-in, or ADUC. So I'm going to go ahead and open this. So this is a very vanilla environment. Single domain controller, single domain, single forest. I have no additional created users. I have one PC, so there's not a whole lot here to see other than, as you can see here on the left though, this is your hierarchy tree. So you can, there's your domain, and then your domain controller's organizational unit. This houses any domain controller. So I've just got one, so there's only one domain controller computer object in here. If you had multiples, then you would have multiple computer objects for the domain. So you look here, there's two containers. These are built-in containers that are configured by default. And then you have your built-in groups that are created by default. Computers, so this is where if you join a computer to an Active Directory domain, unless you specifically set it to a different location, it's going to join the computers and add them to this container by default. And the same goes for users as well. If you don't specify during when you create users, they will get added here by default. So it's pretty straightforward. Up here at the very top where it says Active Directory users and computers, this is where if you had multiple domains within a forest, you could actually browse and change to what domain you want to go to. Since this is a single one for right now, there's not much I can do. The same goes for if you had multiple domain controllers and you wanted to actually look at the Active Directory data store for that specific domain controller. Let's say if you had one in Chicago or a different site, different location, you could select which domain controller you wanted to connect to. Again, for right now, there's only one DC, so there's not much to show here. If you right click, you have several different options here. Again, you could change domain controller. You could raise domain functional level. This particular DC is at the highest functional level, so there's no options to change it. But if it was at a previous level, such as like Windows Server 2008 or 2012 R2, then you could potentially raise it to the latest and greatest. So what I'm going to do here real quick, and also the operations master. So if you want to see which domain controllers house some of the operations masters within Active Directory, so like your relative identifier row, your PDC or primary domain controller row, and then your infrastructure master row, you could do that by going here. So as you can see here, since I've got one domain controller, he's going to house all rows. Basically, the only one you do not see here is the schema master, which I'll show you where you can view what DC has a schema master here in a little bit. It's in a different snap-in. And so go ahead and close that. And then you have the option for new. So this is where you can create different objects. Pretty much the most common is going to be computer, contact, not so much anymore. Used to, like, especially when you had Exchange 2003, the integrations with Exchange and Active Directory, you could create contacts that would be used. Um, Computers, groups, and users is really, and organizational units is primarily what you would use the most. So I'm just going to create an OU, and I'm just going to call it, we'll just call it employees. So as you can see now, we've got an OU called employees. One of the big things with containers versus organizational units, as you can see with the container, there's no option. There's really, you can't apply permissions, you can't delegate permissions, you can't do anything like that with containers. You know, that's a little bit different in regards to if you look at organizational unit, you can actually delegate control. So then there's this wizard that you can go in and you can set, you can delegate various controls to users or groups. So like if you wanted an admin that could only reset passwords or just create users or unlock accounts, stuff like that, you could actually go through this delegation wizard and set those permissions and tie them to a user, or best practice would be tie it to a group and then add those users to that group. And one of the other things with OUs, you can apply what's called group policies to organizational units. You cannot apply group policies to Active Directory containers. So I'm just going to create a user real quick. We'll just walk through this, and we're going to just create a user. Password real quick. So here's some options with creating a user. User must change password at next logon. So when they log onto the computer, if it's on the network for the first time, then it will force them to change their password. You could select user cannot change their password. Password never expires, or you can create the account, but the account will be disabled, which means they wouldn't be able to log in until that account gets enabled. So I'm just going to leave it all unchecked for now, since this is just test. So now you can see we've got a new user object. And then the same goes for, I'm just going to go ahead and create a couple OUs. And we're just going to call groups. And this is just my preference. Creating any type of containing object in Active Directory, I typically create them with all uppercase, and then if I create users and stuff like that, then those are lowercase, uppercase, first name, stuff like that. To me, it's cleaner, it looks better. So I'm going to just create a group, and we're just going to call this test group 1. So as you can see here, we've got different groups, different group scopes and group types. So there's 3 different group scopes: domain local, global, universal. Domain local, you pretty much would use that. So you would create a domain local group. So we'll just call this test group run. We'll create a domain local group, and we're going to make it a group type of security. So the difference between a security group and a distribution group is that a security group, you can apply security permissions. So you can add it to access control lists for various different things. Distribution group type, that's more for email lists. So you could create a distribution list, add a bunch of users to it, and apply an email address to it. So then you send an email to that email address that's set to the distribution list, and it will actually send the email to all members of that distribution list. You cannot apply security permissions or add a distribution list to an access control list. So we're just going to create domain local security. So now you can see, okay, I've got test group 1. So if you look at test group 1 real quick, As you can see, by default, it just creates the group. It's not a member of any other groups, and it has no members. You can set who manages it. This is more for informational. So I'm going to go ahead and add the newly created Luke Skywalker. So now, once I hit apply, Luke Skywalker is a member of Test Group 1. You could also create printers, print queues within Active Directory user and computers, contacts, so on and so forth. So that's pretty much it with, oh, one other thing too is if you look and you look at the various tabs within like a user group object, there's a couple tabs missing. There's the attribute tab, the object tab. So, and some of those prove useful, especially if you want to actually go in and update some of the attributes for the, let's say, the user object in Active Directory that are by default not listed here, and there's a lot of them. Or if you do a find and you want to actually find out the true location that the object lives in within Active Directory, you would want to come up here to View, Advanced Features. So then now you'll see, and you'll also see some hidden objects, hidden containers and stuff like that. So now if I wanted to, I could, let's go find, let's look for Luke Skywalker, and the find button, the find dialog window is pretty useful, especially if you're in a larger Active Directory environment with thousands of, with hundreds of OUs and nested OUs and thousands of objects. So now when I open this up, you'll notice the object tab is here. So then you can actually find out exactly where the location lives, when the object was created, what the class of the object is, you know, the last modification, the update sequence numbers, and then you could also check protect object from accidental deletion. So if I did that, and then I went in here and let's go to properties real quick because I just want to show you. So now you can see that there's the attribute editor tab. So this has a list of all attributes associated to the user object. And this list gets longer and longer depending on what applications you install. Like for example, if you install Exchange on-prem, Exchange will go out and extend the schema, which then will add a bunch of different attributes as well. So, and there's various different solutions that extend the Active Directory schema. Okay, so that comes handy quite a bit. But one thing I wanted to show you, so if I hit delete, it gives me an error message that says you do not have sufficient privileges to delete Luke Skywalker. And that's, you don't typically see that for user objects. But it is very very important with like containing objects, especially organizational units that could potentially house, you know, hundreds to thousands of objects, anything from security groups to users. So again, and one thing to note is when you create an OU, by default, it's protected. So if I came in here and let's say I accidentally hit delete or Control D and tried to delete this, it's going to give me an error message, which is a good thing, right? So that's pretty much it for the Active Directory users and computers. Again, it's not a lot to it, but it is very it's widely used across IT organizations. So the next one we're going to talk about is Active Directory sites and services. So again, this is a vanilla environment. So you can see default first site name. Inside that site, you can see the domain controllers. So I could come in here if I wanted to, and I could rename this. And let's just call it, I'm from Indianapolis, so let's just call this Indianapolis. And I could create an additional site, and I could call that, let's say, we'll just call it Miami. And then created to finish configuration of Miami, ensure that Miami is linked to other sites, site links appropriate, add subnets. So now we have an additional site, but there's no domain controllers. So if I was to promote another member server to a domain controller, then I could associate that domain controller with the site. So one thing you can do, one thing you'll do in here is, again, you can come in here and protect it from accidental deletion. So inside here, you've got, again, change forest. So you can manage multiple forests within Active Directory sites and service. You can change to different domain controllers. Inter-site transports. Typically, you'll see you can create multiple site links. So you can look and you can tell, okay, which sites are part of this default site link. So you can see Indianapolis and Miami. So if I had a DC in Miami, then they would replicate, inter-site replication between the two. Subnets, so this is where we would create, you would have subnets. So like I could come in here and I'm going to say subnet, and I'm going to call it 10.0.0.0. I'm going to do a /24, and then I'm going to associate that subnet with the Indianapolis, because that's what my domain controller and my one computer is at. It's on the 10.0.0.0. So I'm going to hit OK. So then now you see the subnet there. So if I go to properties of this guy, you can look at the various, here's the canonical name of the object. You can look at the attribute editor for this object. So you can see all the different attributes associated to this object within Active Directory. You can see what site this subnet's associated with, and then what the prefix is. And then I can just call this, we'll just call this user network and user and server network. Again, in a production environment, you could have these, there'll be multiple subnets. You have a user subnet, you could have server subnet, you have a DMZ. There's various different reasons to slice and dice up the subnets. One of the things too is the reason why you associate domain controllers to subnets is that when a computer comes online and it authenticates and it connects to Active Directory, based on the IP address, that's how Active Directory knows which domain controller to have basically fulfill that request. And that's pretty much it. The other thing I do want to show is, see, if there was, since this is only one domain controller, there would actually be Ntds settings. There'd be like from DC01 to DC02, and that's in the Miami site. And then you could look at it and you can set it, set some attributes in there. And then you can come in here and then you can see it's a global catalog, the object, security, attribute editor. Again, each object within Active Directory has various attributes associated to that object, and these attributes are different based on what kind of object object it is. So like a security group is going to have different attributes associated to it than a user object, and a site object is going to have different attributes than domain object. So that's pretty much it for sites and services. Let me go ahead and cancel there, and let's go ahead and close this out. So then the next one is domains and trusts. So this is a snap-in that you would use if you were wanting to set up a trust with a separate forest, or a separate domain. And then you would come in here, and then so if you right click on this, you can actually, so if you come here, you can look at operations master. So this actually tells you what the operations master is as well. And then you can right click, you can change domain controller, you could raise the forest functional level. Again, I'm at the highest level for the forest, so there's no option to actually upgrade it. This here is where you could manage and DC via Active Directory users and computers. So if you go to the properties here, it shows you domain functional, forest functional. This is where if you wanted to set up a trust, you could set up a trust with a different Active Directory forest and then walk through the trust wizard. And that's pretty much it for the domains and trusts. Then ADSI edit, that's another tool that you can use if you want to go in and edit the raw LDAP information. So you've got your schema, which you could come in here and you can actually look at the schemas. So there's a schema for all the different, so you can see account. If I wanted to, I could do a search. Maybe. So we want to CN, let's look for user. So if we go down here to user, so we can go look at the properties of the user, and you can see again for this user object, here's all the various attributes that are associated with that object. So as you can see, USN changed, categories, the GUID, global unique identifier for that, all the different, and then you can connect to the different, so the default naming context, which that's what you typically see when you are in Active Directory users and computers. Built-in computers, one PC, groups. So if I looked at one PC, so this is the object. This is the computer object, so you can see all the different attributes. So the password last set time, SAM account type, SAM account name, all the various, some of this stuff is very useful. And then we've got, one of my favorites is the Active Directory module, PowerShell module. So within here you can do a lot of scripting. So let's do get AD computer, and let's just do star. So you can see I've got two computer objects. I got DC01 and WinPC01. You can do there's various things you can do. So you can do like a get command if you were just curious to see what all commands that you would have. And you could do a get command. Let's do get AD star. So then you can see all the different AD based get commands. You could do so let's just do get 80 computer or 80 group. Let's just do star again. So this gives me a list of all groups within Active Directory, within my Active Directory environment. And I could even go in here and I can say sort, let's pipe that, sort object, and let's do it by name. So now you can see it gives me the list of groups, but they're all sorted in alphabetical order from A to Z. So Active Directory module for Windows PowerShell is very handy, especially if you want to do a lot of scripting, do some reporting and stuff like that. And I'll get into more advanced tools and advanced scripting and PowerShell stuff in some of my future videos. So I'm going to go ahead and just for now, just because this is high level, I'm just going to exit out of that. And then lastly, I just want to, which we already looked at the schema, and you can extend the schema and you can make changes using the Active Directory ADSI edit. But one other snap-in they've got is called the schema. So, but one of the things by default, so I'm going to open up the run box, and then I'm going to type in, actually, hold on. Let's do command. So I want to do a command prompt, run as administrator. If you're going to do any level, computer level changes or anything like that, or you want to view secured information, you always want to run PowerShell, command prompt, stuff like that as an administrator. So once I get in here, I need to go ahead and register the snap-in. So I'm going to go ahead and type in reg srv32 sch mmgmt.ell. So that's going to register the dynamic link library. Okay, so it doesn't like that. So let's see Windows System 32. Got a little ahead of myself there. So let's do this. Change directory. There we go. Regserv 32 schmmgmt.dll. It'd help if I get it right? Huh. Okay, so now we've registered it. So now I can actually type in MMC, and you can add you can see the Active Directory schema snap-in now, because before it wouldn't show up. So now you can come in here and you can look at all the different classes. Again, it's kind of the same thing we did with ADSI edit. It's a little cleaner. And then inside, once you select on the class or the object, and then you'll see all the different attributes. If it's required, if it's optional, if it's a system, the description of each attribute, the source class. And then one other thing that you can do in here is if you right click up here, you can operations master. So this is actually going to show you who the schema master is, and you could actually change it if you had multiple domain controllers. You could actually transfer the role over to another domain controller, which is important, especially if you're looking to decommission, you know, maybe an old domain controller or something that you can't upgrade, things like that. So So that's that. One last thing, we'll go ahead and let's just remove console action file, add remove. So let's go ahead and remove him, and then click OK, and then click the advanced. See, I always forget things when you don't do it a lot. So then you want to change the parent snap into Active Directory. Then at this point, you can go back in and you can add your various tools. And then hit OK. So now you see Active Directory, and then underneath that, and then this gives you the ability to manage all your various systems and all the various components within, all under one single pane of glass. And then you can save this, and then you can just call it whatever you would like: network admin, AD admin, you know, something of that nature, and then you can add it to wherever you want. So let's just say admin tools, then save that there. So now if you go change directory, C, admin tools, then directory, you'll see it's there. So if I just hit AD admin, it's going to load, and there we are, and it saves to where I was at. So this is going to complete this tutorial on an overview of Active Directory management tools. I hope that you find it useful, and if you do, please subscribe, please like the video, and thank you very much.